It began with fire. A black plume of smoke curled into the sky over the North Sea. The year was 793 AD, and a storm of steel had descended upon Lindisfarne. Monks ran, screaming, as axe-wielding warriors stormed the Holy Island, cutting down anyone in their path. The golden treasures of the monastery were looted, its sacred halls desecrated. For the first time, the people of Britain saw the fury of the Northmen. They had come for silver, for glory, for blood, and they would return. Again, and again. And among them, whispered in fear and awe, was the name of a man who would become a legend, Ragnar Lothbrok. This is the story of the Viking invasion, a brutal age of war that reshaped Britain forever. Chapter 1. The birth of the Viking Age. The Vikings were not a people, they were a way of life. They came from Scandinavia, modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, but they were not a unified force. They were chieftains, warlords, and ambitious men hungry for wealth and power. For centuries, these lands had been ruled by local kings and jarls, but as populations grew and resources dwindled, many young warriors looked beyond their shores, and so they took to the seas. The longship was their greatest weapon. Sleek, fast, and deadly, these wooden dragons could travel up rivers, across oceans, and even be carried over land. No coastline was safe. No kingdom was beyond their reach. In the 8th century, the first Viking raiders set sail for the British Isles, seeking treasures, land, and fame. And Lindisfarne was their first great victim. Chapter 2. The Storm of the Northmen. The attack on Lindisfarne in 793 AD sent shockwaves through the Christian world. Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. The Anglo-Saxons who ruled Britain had never faced an enemy like this before. These were not mere raiders. They fought with ferocity, precision, and a thirst for slaughter. Their weapons were simple but deadly: broad axes, long swords, and wooden shields reinforced with iron. They did not fight like civilized armies. They struck without warning, using their longships to raid villages, churches, and monasteries before disappearing into the mist. The kingdoms of Britain, Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, and East Anglia, were ill-prepared. Their armies were slow, their defenses weak. The Vikings saw this, and so they came again. Chapter 3. Ragnar Lothbrok. The man, the myth, the king. The true history of Ragnar Lothbrok is shrouded in mystery. Was he a real man? A king? A warlord? Or was he simply a legend, woven together from the deeds of many great Viking warriors? What we know is this: the name Ragnar Lothbrok struck terror into the hearts of his enemies. He was said to be a son of the god Odin himself, a warrior blessed by fate. He wore trousers boiled in tar to protect against wounds, earning him the name Lothbrok, meaning shaggy breeches. He was a raider, an explorer, a conqueror, and his ambition would change the course of history. The first recorded raids on England had been little more than smash-and-grab attacks, but Ragnar had a greater vision. He did not just seek gold, he sought power. Chapter 4. Ragnars Raids. The first Viking threat to England. In the early 9th century, Ragnar Lothbrok and his warriors set sail across the North Sea. His first great target, the coastal kingdoms of Britain and France. Ragnar's longships were unlike anything the world had seen before. Swift, agile, able to strike and retreat before an enemy could even muster a defense. He raided the east coast of England, striking Northumbria, Mercia, and Wessex. But Ragnar was not satisfied with simple raids. He sought greater glory. According to legend, he led a daring assault on Paris in 845 AD, sailing up the Seine with 120 ships and thousands of warriors. The Franks were helpless. Ragnar and his men sacked the city, forcing the king of the Franks, Charles the Bald, to pay him a ransom of 7,000 pounds of silver to leave. But Ragnar's greatest mistake was yet to come. Chapter 5. Ragnar's fate, the king's death and the wrath of his sons. Ragnar was never content to live in peace. He longed for one final legendary conquest. In 865 AD, he set sail for Northumbria, believing himself invincible. But this time, fate would not favor him. According to legend, his fleet was wrecked in a storm, leaving him stranded and captured by King Aella of Northumbria. Aella, who had suffered at the hands of Viking raids, showed no mercy. Ragnar was thrown into a pit of venomous snakes, left to die as he uttered his final words. How the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffered. Those little piglets were his sons, and when they heard of Ragnar's death, they did not weep. They swore vengeance. This was the beginning of the Great Heathen Army, the most devastating Viking force England had ever seen. The Great Heathen Army, Ragnar's sons bring war to England. By the middle of the 9th century, the Viking raids had evolved into something far more terrifying. They were no longer just raiders, they were conquerors. In 865 AD, a massive Viking force landed on the shores of East Anglia. It was called the Great Heathen Army, a coalition of warriors from Denmark, Norway and Sweden, led by Ragnar's vengeful sons, Ivar the Boneless, a brilliant strategist, crippled in body but unmatched in mind, Ubbe Ragnarsson, a fierce warrior, son of the legendary Viking Ragnar Lothbrok, Halfdan Ragnarsson, ruthless, ambitious and determined to carve out a kingdom in Britain. Their goal? To conquer, not just plunder. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms fell one by one. 866 AD, the Vikings captured York, the heart of Northumbria. 869 AD, they executed King Edmund of East Anglia, turning his kingdom into Viking territory. 873 AD, the kingdom of Mercia collapsed. By 874 AD, the Vikings ruled most of England. Only one kingdom remained free, Wessex, and its fate would be decided by one man. Alfred the Great, England's last hope. King Alfred of Wessex was not the strongest warrior. He was not the largest man, but he was the most cunning. In 878 AD, the Vikings launched a massive attack on Wessex. Alfred and his army were driven into the swamps, forced to live in exile. Most kings would have surrendered, but Alfred did something no Saxon king had done before. He studied the Vikings. He learned their tactics. He changed the way England fought. Instead of meeting the Vikings in open battle, he waged a war of attrition. He built fortresses, strongholds that could withstand Viking assaults. He trained his soldiers to fight like the Northmen, fast, aggressive, and unpredictable. And then, in the spring of 878 AD, Alfred launched his greatest counterattack. At the Battle of Edington, his army faced Guthrum, the Viking warlord. The battle raged for hours, shields clashing, swords tearing through flesh. But this time, the Saxons held. When the dust settled, the Viking army was broken. Guthrum surrendered, and even converted to Christianity, marking a turning point in the war. Alfred had done the impossible. He had stopped the Viking advance. The rise of the Danelaw. But the war was far from over. After Edington, the Vikings did not leave. Instead, they carved out a massive territory in England, known as the Danelaw, a Viking kingdom stretching from York to East Anglia. For decades, England was divided. The Vikings ruled the north and east. The Saxons held the south and west. But even in peace, the Viking influence reshaped Britain forever. Old Norse mixed with Old English, creating words we still use today. Sky, anger, law, knife, husband. The Vikings introduced new shipbuilding techniques, changing naval warfare. They built thriving trade cities like Jorvik, modern York, turning it into one of the most powerful cities in England. The Vikings had come as conquerors, but they stayed as rulers. The end of the Viking Age and Ragnar's legacy. For nearly 200 years, the Vikings ruled parts of England, but in the 11th century, a new power rose. In 1066 AD, the last great Viking king, Harald Hardrada, sailed to England in one final attempt at conquest. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge, the Vikings were met by King Harold Godwinson. The battle was fierce, brutal, and legendary, but this time, the Saxons stood victorious. It was the end of the Viking Age, but the story was not over. Just 3 weeks later, England faced a new invader. From across the sea, William the Conqueror landed in Hastings, and history would change again. The Viking invasion was more than just war. It was a collision of civilizations, a battle for power, wealth, and survival. But Ragnar's legacy did not die. His name, his legend, still echoes through history. And we ask, was Ragnar Lothbrok a real man, or was he something more? A myth? A legend? A god of war? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic history.